Hello, hello. Welcome to the Eros Revolution podcast. I am your host today, Maya Gilbert. Joining me is Kapil Gupta, a dear friend, and we are here to talk about all of the latest and greatest in the world of current events, topics, and the Eros point of view on it. So to start, we will show a video and then we will do some lively commentary.
Why did you say that the price of survival is the equality of women?
Because if women have full ability to enter into all facets of the human condition, if they can enter business, if they can enter religion, science, government on an equal basis with men, they will be so busy that they won't feel as necessary to have a great many children. As long as you have women under conditions where they don't feel any sense of value, no self-worth, except as mothers, except as baby factories, they'll have a lot of children, because that's the only way they can prove they're worth something. In general, if you look through the world, the lower the status of women, the higher the birth rate. And the higher the birth rate, the lower the status of women. So that if you could somehow raise the status of women, I am certain the birth rate will fall drastically through the choice of the women themselves.
All right. So with that, I wanted to bring this topic to the floor today. I have been seeing so many different discussions on the topic of the birth rate crisis in the whole globe happening, and there's so many different ways that people are talking about it. You have the nations talking about it and how they're addressing this concept of falling birth rate in many countries. You have people like Elon Musk, who clearly are very personally interested and talk about it a lot, actively are trying to contribute to more children in the world. And then you have random little Instagrams that you come upon often. So things like this. And then I just see a lot of also feminist discourse on what feminists in the modern age think about birth rate and the cause of it and what our whole perspective is about it. So I thought that it's a very rich conversation, and I think that there's a lot of kind of nuance to addressing it, and I wanted to bring it here first. And Kapil, if you'd like to start, and then I can riff, and we'll just get going.
Wow. As I was watching that video, like, yeah, truth. That was the first thing that came to mind, and I feel like it what it was talking about was this idea of conditioned masculine and feminine. In that, uh, when I look at just my own relationship to relationships, and being in committed relationships, the whole idea of um, like in the past, relationships were, or marriages, let's just look at marriages for example, they were very functional, and somewhere it feels like uh people who were bringing in the money somehow started thinking that we are more important than people who are raising family, like feminine beings and women, that they're somehow of lower importance. That's how I relate to it, and I think in that the entire sort of feminism uh, debate started from there. It's like, okay, now we got to bring in people at their equal status. But then as a result, like we live in a very masculine conditioned culture in that way. So the way we define our worth, our value, kind of starts to come from these masculine attributes and ways. And in that way, I think what that video is talking to is that particular concept. And within that, I feel what it's also talking about is somewhere in our culture we've stopped appreciating the feminine attributes in that way, and that is where I think it uh, like feminine being women, and like as women come more into their power and realize that actually it's not about proving self-worth, it's about sort of having the hunger, the feminine, all sort of the whole spectrum of feminine attributes are as powerful as and as important in this culture. Uh, I don't think birth rate really is going to be an issue, but I think the cultural commentary really is on what we've, as a society, what we've created as more important and less important. That's how I see it. What do you think?
It's so interesting how many different avenues this goes down for me. So I'm just gonna rattle off a few of the things I guess that I feel like I don't hear people talking about, or when they talk about this conversation. So it's like on the one hand, so it's like a lot of the arguments that I see people talking when they talk about birth rate are maybe a narrative or a structural or even like biological, like what's in our food, what's in our water, that's that's preventing us from having babies now. Um, and or into the societal, like, how our men and women's relationships and the distribution of workforce and things like that. But I don't really hear anybody talk about two aspects of it. One is I think that it's a great conversation to be like, okay, well, how about we, again, back to the same conversation that I have every day, how about we really just turn all of our attention to turning women on? And so,
Right.
and so kind of when you get back down to it, it's like on all of these fronts. And the thing is, I don't know if that would help the birth rate necessarily. Maybe if you turn women on and liberate them, I don't know if that's ultimately their desire. How much is conditioned desire and how much is liberated desire to have a baby? Though I think more attention put into that arena will help balance everything. And so, and
Right.
definitely when you get to something that is in the realm of children and procreation and creating life, um, it seems like such an obvious solution, such an obvious method and next step that one can take. And so I think it's really um, interesting that so many people spend a lot more time talking about like the the workforce issue and equal pay, about birth rate and all these stuff, instead of talking about, well, how turned on are the women of our world right now or not, and how do we talk about that?
I love
And
that. I think, sorry.
yeah.
No, it reminds me of that principle, erotic principle we talk about. It gets worse before it gets better, and I think there's a fear of it getting worse. And we can't see far into like the horizon that, oh, actually it might, women do turn on, as women do become more and more powerful and come in more power and be take their seat, they they would want to, fulfill their appetite. And in the short term, it might look like that it will get worse, but that's needed. That's part of the trajectory before it rebalances out, right? I think that's how I see it. And there's a real fear of that. We just want things to get better, and we're not really ready for the downstroke. We're just always looking for the upstroke. But what we
Mhm.
really need is the downstroke to get back into our body, collectively. So I feel that there's a fear of that too.
Yeah. And really understanding what I think I can't conceptualize. I think it's hard for most people to conceptualize what a declining amount of people would mean, what, like, there is so much talk about an excess of waste and ways that and how and the ways that we, like, that there's hunger and all of these things, these problems that we have not solved yet. And I think that there's probably enough resources on the planet to feed everyone and to house everyone and to have everyone have a flourishing life, but we haven't solved that problem yet. So that's also another way that I think about this is instead of instead of being fixated on the aspect of birth rate its decline. It's how, if there is a trend in this direction, what is it meaning on a lot of these different fronts, you know? And so I think it is important to say, like, you know, are there chemicals in our food and water that are affecting our bodies, and we should know about that. But I also, in a kind of larger sense and maybe a more spiritual sense, when these trends happen, it's like, okay, is there something else it's pointing to? And is there something else that we could begin to perceive and contemplate from it? And so one of them is, we have yet to do a good job at taking care of the amount of people that do exist on the earth now, and having a really thriving globe in many different places. And so how do we create a world that is flourishing to start, and that understanding that if you put your attention on that, a lot of these problems will be much easier to sort out, will be much more obvious of how they would sort out if you addressed that kind of a thing first. And then the third thing that I think people don't talk about enough in this conversation also is just the relationship between AI and this. And this is like a little bit almost at the edge of kind of even what I can conceive of. Maybe I could ask ChatGPT while we're on this what it thinks about this. But I do see a relationship between something of a frontier we are on with AI, and with a whole potential leap in civilization into a thing that we have yet to ever have seen before and understand. And that there's a relationship there. When I just have always thought about declining birth rate, something about the trajectory of civilization with AI has to do with that as well.
Yeah, and I would add to that is the community aspect of it. Like I have a few friends who are single mothers, and just sort of talking to them about the struggle between living as a turned on woman and having a family and having kids, and just how the how just there is no support as a community available for them to live a life as a turned on woman. And sure, there's a part of it is they have to find their own power inside of it. And I think how do we create communities so that there is support available for women to have that, to because my experience talking to people uh, is that people are struggling. Mothers are struggling with kids, and quite often the conversation goes in a way that, oh, I love my kids, and if given a choice, I'm not sure if I would have them. And partly because it's just a continuous struggle. Um, uh, so I think there is that community conversation. How do we build communities that allow that the thriving nature of being mothers and parents, uh, and make it less about alimony, or there's a big discussion in men's forums, for example, around divorce, for example. If you have kids, and what it means economically. And there's a lot of discussion in men's forums where people are like, oh, like, make sure you are protected. And it goes back to the same thing, where somehow all of the economics and the financials and the all of those things become more important than some of the attributes that come with the caring and the nurturing and the make the connection and the intimacy. So it really, I think we're just in that place in the world where it needs to just turn 180 degrees, you know?
I mean, this is fantastic. I love this conversation so much. I love the back to the kind of what would it mean to create a flourishing world. Um, this is part of it. How do we actually create a society and system structures that help for best flourishing. And so part of that is, how do we distribute resources in a better way? How do we have more community support overall? Um, and just for many different genres of how a person would want to live their life. And especially, I think the thing is in alignment with a kind of like ability to be in alignment more with nature, to be in alignment more with someone who wants to be turned on in life, in Eros.
Amen.
Amen. Beautiful. Love that. Any final thoughts on that topic?
I mean, the only other thing I was, as you were talking about the last point about, flourishing society, my experiences with this work has always been that the first thing we have to do is to get turned on ourselves, and uh, it has ripple effects. When we do our work, in short term, it might feel like, oh, it's just struggle and suffering and all that kind of stuff. But when we get turned on, when individually we get turned on, every conversation we're having, every person we touch, there is a ripple effect that happens that we can't necessarily see. But over a medium or long term, we do get to see. I think one of the things we used to talk about in coaching programs and in the past was like, oh, sometimes we will come back 10 years later, 12 years later, say, oh wow, that's one thing you said that, and it changed the trajectory of my life. And we're like, we have impact when we go through that turn on process. That's the only additional thing I would say.
Beautiful. All right, we'll go to our next video clip.
You want freedom with no responsibility. Son, there's only one person on earth who gets that, yeah.
The president.
A baby. You're fighting for your right to be a baby.
So I just randomly found this clip, and I thought that it could be a really fun a fun game to have Kapil talk about what this means in the context of men, and I'll talk about what this means in the context of women.
I don't know. This is oh boy. I feel like I can only, if I relate it to my own life, uh, I would say that I was really a boy for sort of first 35 years of my life. In that, um, I think we often grow up physically and in age. However, psychologically, spiritually, for men, I'll just speak about men. I think we stay boyish for until there's like a wake up. Until, for me, that was the truth. I think uh, I went through a divorce after 11 years of being married, and even few years after that, it was like, oh my God, what happened? And when I actually started to look into it, I realized how much I was just sort of a boy, uh, even though from an ego standpoint, it was like, no, no, I'm this successful guy who's worked in the corporate sector and got the status, got the money, and all those things. But psychologically, spiritually, um, I was very much a boy, and I see that everywhere. You know, I see that in men in our society everywhere. It's like there there's this idea. I think, especially in the masculine conditioning, is that you perform, you build status, you do all these things, you acquire things, and somehow you will find fulfillment. You will, there isn't any eros in it. There is no turn on in it. There's no wake up in it. And the kind of people I work with these days, There are people from like mid 20s, 30s to 60s, and at different points in our lives, we realize, oh my God, I've got to this point, but I'm still a boy. So that's what that video speaks to me. It- uh, and even that thing, oh yeah, who gets the past, the president. No. So it's funny in a uncomfortable way.
How do you think men in culture right now relate most to the wanting freedom with no responsibility? And what is the unique responsibility that you think that is the right one that pairs that desire for freedom with the responsibility that is needed right now with men?
Oh wow. I feel wow, this is a big thing. I think I feel very passionately about, like, for instance, anyone in our culture who has any kind of power, they gotta have some kind of like erotic intelligence or emotional intelligence test that they have to go through before they're given any kind of power. So that would be the first thing to start. But if there was one thing I would say, for me, it starts with self-awareness. I think we're just like sleepwalking. So if there was one power I was given, I would start kids in school. One of the key things that they will have to do is to become self-aware, whether it's in school or through parent. They do it in their family, but that is one key thing, like self-inquiry. Like, who am I? You know, what is my impact on the world around me, on the people around me, on the women around me, on the environment, everything. And that comes, I think the first thing is self-awareness, which we're, I think if there's a pandemic, that's the pandemic. Does that, I don't know if it answers the question
No,
that you
it
asked.
totally does. No, I love it. I thought that it was because this is something that I think about so often with women right now because I think that this is one of the unique, just one of the crux conundrums that women are in right now is they want freedom without responsibility when it comes to their liberation. I think that women want a tremendous amount of uh, in the realm of sexual freedom, for instance, they there's a lot of demand. There's a lot
Yeah.
of ways that they want to experience freedom, to experience um, I mean, I think everyone has the right to experience equality, but they want freedom is different. Freedom is like an inner freedom that they want to experience. And then when you come to things like the Me Too movement, when you come to things like how they address how they to go about it, they want a level of freedom without a level of responsibility for what it means to acquire that kind of freedom. To acquire inner freedom um, means a certain level of self-possession and ownership and and um, an authority over your experience that then when there's an absence of, like that clip says, it's, who has the right to have freedom with no responsibility? A child. And so there's this cycle that women then in this culture are stuck in and cannot get out of making these demands, having these requests, having these desires for a certain level of that experience without holding the responsibility of them. And so then they then are requesting to be treated like children. And I think that I think that until women can see through this, and I don't think that I honestly still, and I might be naive, I still am in the position that I think that women just do not see the math before them. Like they don't see that the continual um, trying to bring in authority figures into their sex life from college campuses into the government, into all of these things, the more you bring an authority figure in to be the arbiter of your relational experiences, the closer we're going to get to something like The Handmaid's Tale, where then they control everything. You know, talk about birthright. You know, then they control everything, and they'll then have the monitoring system of how it all happens, how it all needs to happen. You're handing over your entire world in that sense to these external authorities, and they don't see that. So I'm still under the belief that they don't see that math, that they don't see the equation well enough, and that if there's any way that I can continuously spell out the equation, that women can band together to do that, that we can begin to turn the tide. And it's understandably really challenging, and experiences that happen in the world can be very challenging and hard and painful to face and learn how to integrate and learn how to resolve within oneself. But there will be no freedom, there will be no liberation, there will be no reclamation of what is actually possible in the realm of a woman's erotic experience if we don't do that. And we're stuck in this certain level of foisting responsibility. And
Why do you think that is, though? Like, what is there something in the cultural conditioning that um that does it, or is there like a crosswire between surrender, the experience of surrender, uh, but the fantasy of like, oh, it will just work out, but when reality hits, it's completely different because of the cultural conditioning?
I think the reason that we're in the situation we are right now is a few things. Let me think. There might be more, but I'll say the first things that come to mind. One is I don't think we have great examples. I don't think that
Yeah.
we have hardly any examples of women who forge this path themselves, who say, I will be sexually sovereign, and show you very generously what that means and what that looks like, and how you handle each of these different kinds of situations that one can get in. Um, and uh, and so I think that without having a model, you just look to whatever is available. And so currently what's available is what it is, you know. And so I think that's a huge one that I think is that we need more models of women demonstrating what it is, so you can see the attractiveness of it. And you can see, oh, it is hot. It is super hot to be sexually sovereign and to have a lot of ownership of your experience in all domain. That you feel like your pride is in your resilience and in your capacity for experience and in your capacity for communication and in your capacity for nuance and difficult terrain of relating, and that you actually believe in your own power, and that you don't that the attractiveness of that versus an inherent sense that you are less powerful or giving your power away in some way. I think that's huge. Um, and then I think also just um, I think women live in a state of tumescence. They live in a state of turned offness that then has just any kind of thinking about it just feel agonizing and be tremendously difficult. And then the only thing that would resolve it is connecting to their desire and turning on. And I think for most women, it is a challenging and it is a daunting pursuit. And it's easier to stay, you know, and it's this funny trip because I think a lot of women think that they're being alternative in all of these ways of speaking about it, and that they're being that they're being anti-mainstream when they're like the most mainstream, because they're still just living in a state of you're so able to be controlled when you're turned off because you have no access to your inner power. And
Right.
so to truly turn on and have that force be alive inside of you would be the thing that would be the resolution.
Yeah, makes sense. As you were talking about it, I was thinking that in terms of role models, it's also the same with men. Like there aren't really any role models. Like when you look at role models, it's all about success. It's all about, you know, making money or power in the sense of proving self-worth as opposed to real erotic leadership. And similarly, there aren't really any um, relational uh, role models in terms of like the erotic, how an erotic relationship uh, looks and feels like.
How would you describe it? If you were to describe the model you would want to see in the world.
I feel like what comes to mind is a desire-led relationship, like where like a woman's desire is leading the relationship, and it's a relationship where both people, instead of like traditionally what relationship is about is completing each other or looking for the better half. It's a relationship where people come in as we one of the things we say is like at the foundation is friendship. Like you come together as best friends, supporting in each other in being the best version of themselves. And instead of shining light inwards, you shine light outwards, uh, in making the world, your community, your environment better and flourish. Not from the place of um, like being hungry, but from the place of like nourishment. And one thing I feel we often don't see is just how much impact we have in every moment on our environment. I think one of the most important things I've learned from home is that every stroke, every moment, everything I'm doing, everything that's happening, there is always an impact. There's always dominoes falling somewhere. And yeah, so those would be the things that I would look at.
It's beautiful. I think that this very well goes into the next piece of content that we want to share, which is a Instagram post by Nicole Daedone, founder of Orgasmic Meditation. And the post is from an Eros Sutra, which is a series of books that she wrote that are the foundational principles of erotic philosophy. Really recommend reading them. And so this is just a little clip of it. So we ask too little of Eros. In Eros, the physical experience of sex is the vehicle that is there to transport us to the destination point of the present moment with another human being. We often think that people want too much sex, but the issue is that they ask too little of it. We go from the garage to the driveway and consider it done when the erotic is inviting us to the outer edges of the known universe. We use what is meant to be a rocket, like a tricycle, and wonder why we tire. So, hopping off of our last point of discussion, it really is this, I think, place that people don't see what is possible in so many realms of relating the world at large and relating specifically. And so our designs for how we get to where we want to go are the similarity of a tricycle when it could be a rocket. And I would love to hear just kind of what your insights and what you have learned in life and through the practice of Om and Eros of what you learned was possible from what it was and what you would want to communicate about that.
Wow. Just like that. uh, I think the tricycle and the rocket, what I what I what I my personal experience of it, and also what I see a lot, is the fear of unknown, and trying to be in control. You know, I think we're just so addicted to control, as human beings, that anything that takes us to the edge of that control, we just don't want to go anywhere. I think that's what Nicole's post kind of reminds me of. For me, um, I think there was a point where I realized that my known universe was just a tiny, tiny part of what was possible, with Om, with the erotic path. There was like this. I know it's abstract, but I felt there was a point where I felt there was this curtain that I could peek through, and there was this whole world of feminine energy, feminine world. There's a whole universe available that I didn't even know existed. And it's like this mystical, uh, amazing place where a completely different um, language was being spoken that was not a direct, rational, logical language, but a language of feeling, uh, which was in some ways like I knew it, but I had forgotten about it. Like when I was a kid, I knew it. And when now I look back, it's like, oh my God, yes, of course I was fluent in it. But because of all of the social conditioning, I had completely lost touch. And all I needed and wanted was control. And I think this path really allowed me to see that world again, and become re-familiar with it, and also um, at a point that I'm not looking for a final solution. I know that this is a lifelong path, and things will just keep unfolding until I die. You know, um, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
Yes, that's
that's that's
beautiful.
been my
Beautiful.
journey.
No, I mean, I think about this so often these days. Uh, I talk to a lot of, I'm now living back in New York. I talk to a lot of friends, and I go on dates with guys who I'm like meeting for the first time. And the thing that I think is still so interesting, like I'm like, I've been practicing Om for 16 years. I've been having this conversation. I remember when I first learned orgasmic meditation, meditation itself was not a popular thing yet in the
Right.
culture. So I was like, okay, I get it. Talking about a, a different way of approaching our sexual experience that's non-linear, that's not about climax and all these like I was like, okay, I get that this is like way kind of ahead of the curve, because like just trying to focus on your breath and your body alone, it was like kind of taboo at the time itself. Now we are 2025, and it's just so, like, I guess I just keep being so surprised at how the conversation really is taking so long to advance in some of these arenas where I think especially there's a huge one with climax, and how the world just still is so understanding of our intimate experiences, that as the be all end all of an experience, and the entirety of experience that's available within an intimate setting, or within even relationally, that it that we put the bar so low in terms of what is available for connection and what is available to explore. I think most of the time people don't even know that it's possible. They don't know, or they don't know what is possible. They don't know what is available. Like you said, like they don't know what is behind that curtain.
Yeah.
Um, And so then we have a world that operates at a pretty low level of of experience, and is very
Yeah.
scripted and is very much just the formula of what we have as a relationship. And so to kind of understand what is possible in terms of even in simple ways, and it's not even, it's again, for anyone who's listening and thinks I'm trashing climax, climax can be great. It's just when you don't know the possibilities of everything that is possible, and that's kind of like the only thing that you know is possible. And the experience that one can have where of knowing, like, and traveling into the back of one's soul feeling, or the experience of, like, what does it feel like to be completely still and quiet with another person, and what can open there, and all of these the different explorations and environments that can be so enlivened and accessed in a way that you can't access it by yourself. I think that that's, a fundamental point of Om is that Om is a partnered practice. You cannot do it alone because you can't take yourself out of control, and you can't get into those involuntary places by yourself. And so same thing relationally, you can't get to these places by yourself. And yet we kind of have this lowest common denominator of a place we know as a destination, and what else is possible and what else is available, and how do you begin to explore that, and how do you begin to talk about that with people so that we have a richer and more creative relational experience.
In that way, climax is the tricycle.
Exactly. Exactly. No,
Right?
it's, for how much could be available
Yeah.
with any woman. I just want to make this clear. This is available with any woman in her interior world, and the labyrinth of her desire, and the exploration of who she is and what she likes and what turns her on and what closes her a little bit, and how you explore that entire terrain with any single woman. So intricate and so interesting as a pursuit. And the level of attention it would take and to cultivate, to be able to pay attention to her, to feel as a man, I think, to feel and to pay attention, and then to notice, and then to engage and stroke and see how you create a whole world.
I love that. I think that's a good peak.
I think so too. All right. Well, with that, thank you all for joining our Eros Revolution podcast. We have this podcast 2 times every week, every Monday and Thursday, with different guests and hosts on, always talking about topics of the culture with the erotic point of view. If you have any topics that you want covered, you can always message us on the Eros platform Instagram or on our erosplatform.com. We have a class in orgasmic meditation coming up on September 20th. It is free and it is online on the platform, available for anyone to take. And with that, until Monday, see you then, and stay